one of the hard conversations that the nation is hopefully having was, highlighted by Mitch McConnell recently, having whatever happened to him.
An episode,
right? Very publicly.
Yeah.
And then before that, several months ago, Dianne Feinstein was also out sick for months, and people were calling on her to please step down because her health was impeding. She sits on some very important committees, and when she's not there, nobody's there. Like, there's no backfill for her, right, to make those decisions. So, the idea of, age, I think talking about, using age as a factor to prevent somebody from being in a job is a hard conversation, right? It doesn't feel right to people to, I think, and generally in this day and age, right? Like, it doesn't feel right to people to say, you're too old.
Right. And there's this whole idea of ageism.
Yeah.
Now, to take a step back, what you're talking about is pretty recent news for us.
Yeah.
When Mitch McConnell was giving he was speaking to the press and giving just public comments, and then standing there behind his pedestal, he just kind of blanked out.
Yeah.
And it was the strangest thing to watch, too, because he's having a conversation, he's speaking in that octogenarian voice, and then he just stops.
Yeah.
And he keeps staring, and you can see he's got that 10,000-foot stare. It wasn't like a stroke or anything like that. I know some people joke and call it that. He just stopped for a very long time, clearly it was not a strategic pause.
Right.
It was a solid 12, 15, 25 seconds. And then his aides actually started saying, hey, Mitch, is there anything else you want to say? Or people tapping him on the shoulder, and they actually pulled him away from the microphone. But that was an episode. For sure, some break in cognitive process that was partially induced by age. Partially, I think people suspect that he had a concussion not long ago.
Yeah.
So a concussion is a bruise of the brain. The older we get, the longer bruises last.
Yeah, the longer it takes to heal.
But you're exactly right. Like, here is the leader of the Republican Party in the House, unable to communicate to the press.
Yeah.
That's an issue. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
There is no more senior member than him.
Yeah.
And he can't communicate. And then the same point with Feinstein, right?
Yeah.
Here you have somebody who is so critical to some of the most important subcommittees out there that without her presence, nothing happens.
Right.
And she's got, I think it was shingles that she was diagnosed with, so she was absentee.
Yeah.
I mean, these are responses that are induced in large part by age that are impeding their ability to execute the office that they're in.
Right.
So at what point are we allowed to have the hard conversation of saying, hey, maybe old people in positions of leadership in the House and the Congress and the Senate, maybe we shouldn't have them there. Maybe there should be a cap before you're too old.
Just like there's a minimum, right?
Just like there's a minimum.
And federal agencies have caps.
That's a fair point. Like, you can't be older than 38, I think, to apply to certain job categories.
Right. A lot of special agent positions, 37 is the cutoff. Yep. Department of State for Foreign Service, 60 is the cutoff. I think, so I think it's not unprecedented to have an age cutoff, just like you have an age minimum in the federal government. I also think that it's larger than just age, right? Because the people who are of older age in Congress are generally people who have also been in Congress like 20 plus years, right? So it's not just about age for me, it's about term limits, right? Like, how long are you going to sit in that seat when there are other people that are more representative of the demographic that you are trying to represent, right?
And they're competing, right? There are competitors out there trying to fleet up, trying to bring in fresh ideas, trying to bring in, new levels of cooperation, trying to better represent the constituency.
Right.
But they just don't have the long-term support. They don't have the funding base. They don't have whatever that you've developed as a multi-generational, right, holder of a position in government.
Right. I mean, imagine if people knew that after 2 terms, right, let's say maybe not the House, but maybe the Senate, right? After 2 terms, that seat is up for grabs, right? It's open to everybody.
And 2 terms in Senate would be 12 years.
12 years,
12
that's a
years,
long time.
that's a third of a government career right there, more than a third. That's a long time to make an impact. 12
Right.
years is more than two presidents that's two
Yes.
presidents if those two presidents both have consecutive terms.
Right.
That's a long time. You can step down. You
Yeah.
can let someone new step in.
And you should.
And you should. I mean, consider how fast technology has changed, how fast society has changed.
Yeah.
In our adult life, right? And I would say our adult life didn't start until we were really 21. Speaking of adolescence, you're not
Yeah.
really an adult at 18.
Yeah. Well, they say your brain doesn't really stop growing until 25.
25, right?
Yeah.
So cognitively, you and I know you're not an adult when
Yeah.
people say you're an adult.
Right.
And I'd say most people who are over the age of 35 probably also admit, like, yeah, I was kind of a dumb shit at 22. I wasn't really a grown up until I was 28.
Yep.
But either way, if you had the opportunity to bring in fresh adults, 30-year-olds, 32-year-olds, 35-year-olds,
Yeah.
right, to replace the aged out 50-year-olds, 55-year-olds, what you're doing there is you're always having this steady rotation
Yeah.
of new ideas, new talent, new
Yep.
collaborations, new resource pools, new networks that are always coming in, and still leaving plenty of time for people to have a really positive impact and move the
Yes.
government ball forward, move the social ball forward.
And it's not like those people, it's not like the people who, term out or age out can't still be involved somehow.
Correct.
Right? And we know for a fact that that's how it works in DC anyways, that,
It's a revolving
it's
door.
a revolving door. You're going to come back as a consultant in some way anyways.
Making more money.
Right. So, allow the younger generations to come in. I say younger generations because I believe that that's important, right? For me, the position of the elders is to, curate and mentor the youth, right?
Yeah.
The next in line for leadership. If you hold on to your position for 40 years, you're not doing that. You're not doing the job that you're supposed to be doing. So,
Yeah. To your point too, I don't think either of us is saying that we need to bring in youth, right? Like we're
Right.
not saying bring in somebody who's unqualified and zealous.
yeah, we're saying bring in the new blood.
Yeah, because zealots don't work well in Congress either,
Yeah.
right? I do not like AOC. And I know a lot of people out there love AOC. She is a zealot. She is not trying to do what's in the best interest of the country. She's trying to do what this radical base that she represents because of her youth when she started.
Right.
It's just become like this permanent, constant Instagram battle, right? That's
Right.
not what we're talking about.
Because there's definite having experience is important,
Right.
right?
Real world experience.
Real world experience
And having
is
a
important.
real dedication to the office that you serve
Yes.
is super important. You're not self-serving. You're serving a public office that supports a
Yes.
public constituency.
Yes, and you are supposed to represent that constituency.
So how do you feel then about the fact that like the two top contenders for president right now are they both over 75, both over 80?
They're both over 75.
Isn't that insane?
Yes.
And it's not
I
just the
am
United States.
Not happy about it.
If you look at the leadership right now in Latin America, if you look at the leadership across Asia, look at Xi Jinping, you're talking about powerful people, largely men, who are old, and of a generation that is not the modern day digital generation, right? We're talking about people who grew up in the Cold War. We're talking about people who grew up during the time when racial segregation was a thing, right? We're not talking about people who understand cybercrime and who understand, digital evolution and who understand the rise of the internet, right? We're talking about people who came up when things were still done on ink and paper and a courier delivered it.
Yeah, and I think
They're the ones leading the world.
right, and I think that those are very demanding jobs. That if you work in Congress or if you're president, those are very demanding jobs, and you just can't overlook the fact that kind of stress, the kind of hours that a president has to keep, right? It takes a toll. We saw Barack Obama go gray in like 4 years, like completely gray.
Do you remember Bush?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bush had
Yeah.
dirty blonde hair when he took office. He was an ancient old man when he died, when he left office, and it was insane how much of a toll the office took on him.
Yeah, it takes a toll on your health, and you just can't overlook the fact that when you're older it's going to be more impactful. And are you really serving your country if you're going to leave a mess, right? Either by not being able to fulfill the duties, whether the public knows it or not, and possibly even dying in office and then leaving, your second in command, it's just messy.
Yeah.
Why?
It's really
Why
interesting.
do that?
It's funny because, and you and I think, have had this very kind of recent, intimate experience with this because we've started to see our own family members age.
Yeah.
And we've started to see their decline. Yeah. And I'm reminded of a guy in the private intel world that I was working with about a year and a half ago. And his mother-in-law was dying rapidly. And his wife was very dedicated to her mother. So they were traveling to Cincinnati, I think it was, up from Florida to Cincinnati almost every weekend, right? To try to check in.
Yeah.
New health emergency, they needed to do something, right?
Yeah.
And he was commenting after weeks of this, how it's not helping anybody. The mother's life is being prolonged and she's in pain and discomfort and she's disoriented. The wife, his wife, the daughter of the mother is not she's sleep deprived, she's stressed out, she's frustrated, she's disappointed. The whole staff at the hospital is also frustrated and angry and disappointed. He's struggling in his career and his business, trying to keep things running because he's managing a family emergency. For what? Yeah. Right? For what benefit? And you and I kind of see the same thing. We see the same thing with our own families. We see the same thing kind of playing out in the headlines too. Yeah. It's just, we think that they're different, and they're not that different. Yeah. Mitch McConnell is somebody's son. He's somebody's father. He's somebody's brother. He's somebody's grandparents. Yeah. Right? And right now, that family member is watching him become a public spectacle on headlines.
Yeah, we are mortal beings and life has a cycle, right? And we should respect that cycle. When you get to a certain age, you should fill the role of mentor. You should take it easy on yourself, right? Like, I know that you want to be involved and I respect all of your experience and your contribution, but it's not your time anymore, right? It's not your time for that position anymore. Let somebody else in, right? Yeah. And then you take the role of that stage of life that you're in, right? Yeah. Like, kick back, take it easy.
Or not even take it easy, but dedicate yourself in the capacity that you're now qualified to do.
Yes.
You're not qualified to be a mentor when you're 30 years old. I know there's life coaches out there who are like 28 years old. Yeah. So you can't coach shit at 28 years old. You barely qualify to coach softball or like t-ball, for crying out loud. You definitely can't coach somebody's life. High ticket coaches. I love seeing their ads on freaking Instagram. But my point is, you're not qualified to coach at 28. You might be qualified to coach at 48. You're certainly qualified to start giving some wisdom at 58. Yeah. Right? And by the time you're 68, you've seen it all. Yeah. Now all of a sudden you can give people really meaningful guidance, really meaningful counsel, right? Because you've had so much life. Yeah. So much experience, so much secondhand experience. It's incredible what you can do at 68 that you simply can't do at 28. I remember being a kid. I was always in a hurry to grow up. I always wanted to be a grown-up, to make my own decisions, to pick my own food, stay up and go to sleep whenever I wanted to go to sleep, right? I remember wanting to grow up all the time. And then I remember being like 28, 29 and realizing that like I don't have any of the wasta or influence that I want to get shit done. And it was hard to have my hand slapped every time I had a creative idea at CIA and in the military and everything else. And then somehow at like 41, all of a sudden people trust my opinions. Yeah. They didn't trust my opinion at 29. They trust my opinion at 41, right? Even when I talk to people, you've seen me do this. I'll talk to a client or I'll talk to somebody who comes across our radar, and you'll be like, oh, tell me about them. And I was like, oh, he's 32 years old. He's a fucking kid, right? But other people are like 50 years old. I'm like, he's like 50 years old. She's 50 years old. They got to figure it out. Like they have a really good idea because they've had enough life experience to make sure it's a good idea. That 32-year-old may also have a good idea, but I'm still like, but I don't know if he's going to follow through. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to deliver. All right, we haven't had enough assessment data. Yeah. Right?
Well, it's all partially perspective too, because maybe a 30-year-old could be a life coach to like a 19-year-old, right? I was going into
Not my 19-year-old.
I was going into a bathroom the other day, and it was an 80-year-old woman and a 60-year-old woman passing each other. And the 60-year-old woman made some comment about age. And the 80-year-old woman was like, "Oh, honey, you're so young. You just wait and see." And I was like,
it still happens.
It still happens, right? To the 80-year-old woman, the 60-year-old woman's really young, right?
Yeah. So our hard conversation today, for everybody listening, is ageism really something that we need to worry about? Or is ageism actually, does it have some validity? That there really is a time and a place where somebody can be the wrong age for the role that they're in.
Right.
And we're not saying that, all 22-year-olds are idiots and all 60-year-olds are invalids. What we're saying is there's a season, there's a time, there's a place where you can optimize your contribution in line with your age and the experience that you've had and the knowledge base that you have. And there's also very real value in recognizing that there are places where just one generation behind you can come in and make a massive contribution.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very fair but uncomfortable thing for people to admit to.
Right.
And whether or not anything is going to happen with that. I'm pretty sure Mitch McConnell is still going to be running the show. And we've got a lot more old white men still ahead of us in senior positions of government. I can almost guarantee you.
Well, and the other part of that hard conversation is how long should you hold on to power, right? At what point, no matter what age you are, should you let it go?
Yeah, Washington turned it over. That's how the whole country started.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
We'll see. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip or here to see the full podcast episode.